Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Strong Collectors Podcast. I'm your host Dakota, and today we're going to be starting a 10-episode series looking at the 10 major factions within Mythic Legions. So we're going to start out with the 5 bad guy factions first, and then after that 5 we'll get to the 5 good guy factions. Now, these first 5 episodes are going to be sponsored by Empire Toy Shop. They have kindly donated the newest mount in Mythos, Phlogius, which is Poxus's horse, as a giveaway. Now, if you don't know Empire Toy Shop, they are the ones that are often doing the mystery boxes. So you can spend, not very much money to get a chance at winning something that may cost up to like $300, $400, $600. So I love getting those. That's my favorite thing when they post those in the Cabal. I get almost every single one of them because no matter what, you're always going to be getting a good figure because it's Mythic Legions. And sometimes they throw in some extras like extra weapons or heads, accessories, things like that. So it's a really good, it's fun. It's a good bang for your buck, I think, because you always have that chance of getting something that's so much more valuable than what you spent. They don't only sell Mythic Legions, though. They've also got Mezcos, Marvel Legends, G.I. Joes, things like that. So you can go check them out and thank them for sponsoring this episode and the first 5 episodes of this series. Now, to enter to win Phlogius, all you have to do is make sure that you're subscribed. That's number 1. And then you leave a comment down below of what your favorite in that faction would be. So for all of the bad guy episodes, that means you get 5 entries. You can leave 5 comments. You can always leave more than that. But on each of those episodes, leave a comment of what your favorite in the faction is. Make sure you're subscribed, and then you're entered. We only have 1 horse to give away, but you have 5 entries. Now after that, we'll move on to the good guy faction, and we'll do another giveaway over on those. So make sure you're subscribed. And a quick caveat before we get into this list. This is my list. Chances are you're going to have maybe a completely different list than what I have. My favorite figure, maybe your least favorite figure. My least favorite figure is probably somebody's most favorite figure. Feel free to please kindly, roast me in the comments where I went completely off the rails and I ranked something completely wrong, because chances are I may have done something that you don't like. And it's okay, because we're all different. All of these figures are pretty cool. There's not really a bad figure, but when you're making a list like this, something has to be at the top and something has to be at the bottom. So without any further ado, let's get into the Legion of Arethyr. This is going to be our first one. And this one is a pretty big doozy. One of the biggest factions within Mythic Legions. So let's get started. We've got about 39 spots, and coming in at 39th is the Hellfire Goblin. Unfortunately for this guy, he is my least favorite in the faction. I tend not to gravitate towards the smaller figures. I do like some of the goblins, but again, I'm going to usually choose the heftier big boys. And as far as goblins go, this style of goblin isn't my favorite, and then I don't need a red one on top of that, so that's why he's coming in at last place, unfortunately. Still a good figure. I could see him in my collection. He's just not one that I'm probably ever going to try too hard to track down. Next up is going to be Melifar. It's kind of strange to me because blue is my favorite color, so you would think I would love a blue-looking demon guy. Again, kind of the smaller figure, just not really my style. I really do like the way they use the wings, though, how it's kind of like the first part within the Mythic Legion wings. They took off the backsides to make it look a little bit smaller and it fits the character a little bit better. I like the head sculpt. I like the horns. I think it's perfect that he comes with a pitchfork. But again, not one of those figures that I'm going to try too hard to track down. Still, I do like the different colors that you could have on your display. And this is one of those that we don't see this color very often or ever again in Mythos, I don't think. Again, another smaller figure. This is the Bog Goblin. Similar to the Hellfire Goblin, I just don't really love the way the heads look on these guys. I do really like the armor. I like how it looks kind of muddy versus rusty. Maybe a little bit of a mix of both, but it looks like this guy just came right up out of the swamp, and I like that dirty look. Although it's not my favorite figure, I can appreciate the paint scheme on him for sure. Sticking with the small guys, again, goblins, not my favorite. I promise they're not all at the bottom of the list, though. This is going to be the last goblin for at least a little bit. Gonks is cool, but I just think that there are better goblins out there. That's why he's lower on the list. I do like the hammer. Again, the rusty, dirty armor is kind of a cool touch, but typically I'm going to want more of my figures to kind of pop on the shelf, and I think other goblins and smaller characters pop a little bit better than Gonks. Moving up the list, we've got the Cavern Dwarves, and this one I feel like is going to get me some hate. Again, smaller figures don't really tickle my fancy as much. I do appreciate that this is a Legion builder, so he's not really meant to have a lot of paint. And for being a Legion builder, I think he still works really well as just a straight out of the box character. I like the horns. I love the armored beard look. Dual wielding axes, cool. But if I've got to pick some dwarfs, I would probably pick some others before I picked him up. Sticking with the dwarves, again, this is both our Shadowhorn, and this one I could possibly see even swapping with the Cavern Dwarf. I put him here because he's a named character, so he's a little bit more important. However, as far as named characters go, the colors on him don't really scream named character to me. That's why he's kind of lower on the list, and where I could see myself swapping him with a Cavern Dwarf. Just because, again, I would rather my figures pop. He's a little bit more muted, which I understand there's a time and place for that. I just like my figures to, be a little bit more bright, colorful. He's a bad guy, so I guess he shouldn't really be that flamboyant, but here's where he lies on the list. Coming in at 33rd, we've got Juno the Crusher. Now, I think this figure would place a little bit higher on my list if it weren't for the paint on the face. For some reason, it just looks a little too David Bowie wannabe to me. I think I would swap on the head that came in the heads pack. That's probably how I would be displaying it. I do like the figure, though. I like the one armored shoulder, but, you're not going to sway me with a sexy outfit. So 33rd for Juno the Crusher. Moving up the list, though, we've got Gorthok. I like my orcs, but as far as orcs go, he's probably at the bottom of my list. I don't know what it is about him. I just can't bring myself to really be drawn to this character. I like his armor, though. I did almost pre-order him just for the armor, and then I was maybe going to paint the other parts, but I just didn't really see him in my collection that much. Again, I prefer the green orcs, maybe even the red orcs, for sure the red orcs over him. And it's just, I just couldn't connect to this character for some reason. But overall, I can appreciate the paint and the quality, just not for me. Just missing out on the top 30, we've got Swig, another goblin. This goblin is pretty cool. I was pretty excited for him to come out. I think I would like him even more now. I've since traded him, but I think if I still had him, I would be using some of the effects that came in the Poxus wave, and that would really enhance this figure too, because I do love the idea of a magic-wielding goblin, and that dagger, I really like the sheath for that dagger. Cool touch. Now getting into the top 30 here, we've got a three-way tie. I've got Thump, Deluxe Goblin Legion Builder, and Kanubik. Three goblins. I thought they deserved to be kind of in the same spot. I think if I really had to pick one of my favorite out of these three, it would be Thump. I imagine him maybe without the shoulder pauldrons on. He's got like his hammer laying behind him, and I usually displayed him sitting on the edge of my shelf with his feet dangling off. I imagined him just as a little bit more of a carefree, looking up at the clouds kind of goblin. The other one's definitely more ready for battle. Not that Thump isn't ready for battle, but I think he appreciates the peace and quiet a little bit more than other goblins. I like the beefed up look of the Deluxe Legion Builder goblin, and I'm a sucker for a mace, so Kanubik gets points for that. The Stone Troll, although he's cool, he may be my least favorite out of the trolls. I tend to like the bearded heads a little bit more than the unbearded heads, but that's just me. I do like his weapon that he comes with, but again, I do like other trolls better, and when it comes to trolls, I'm not one that wants to have them all. I think it's really cool scaling for the line that you can have something so big, but there's not really that pop and swap ability, and they do tend to be on the higher side of the price tags. So for those reasons, I try to keep my trolls to a minimum, and this troll probably is not going to be finding his way into my collection anytime soon, but feel free to gift me one, and I will happily display him. Next up, we've got another builder. This is the Shadow Orc Grunt. Now, I like him a little bit more than Gorthok, just because of the more armored pieces. I really like the shoulder armor that he comes with. You don't see that too often, at least yet, in Mythic Legions. I don't love this style of sword, and we're going to see that later on too. It just looks a little bit too much like he's going out to play cricket or something. I don't understand the flat curves, and it just looks more like a paddle than a sword to me. But anyway, I like the armor. I do like the color. But again, I'm going to lean towards the green orcs, but I do think this would be good for popping and swapping that armor. Unken is another orc, and the first Motu tribute that we're seeing. I do like the look of him. I like that it's a tribute to Man-at-Arms. Man-at-Arms was never really my favorite character from the line, so that's why he doesn't get a lot of brownie points for that. Again, like I said, though, I do like a good mace, and I like the colors here. You can definitely tell what it's trying to be. The one shoulder pauldron I think is a really cool touch, because I always imagine Man-at-Arms with one big giant shoulder pauldron. So this was a cool one, and it started off all of the Motu tributes, which I think there are some really cool ones out there. So good on him for starting it. but he's so pricey, I don't think I will ever see him in my collection unless I hit the lottery. Moving from male orcs to female orcs, we've got just your general orc. I think this is cool that we have orcs in male and female. I think a lot of times we imagine just male orcs, but Mythic Legions is giving us both. Again, kind of that half armored, half unarmored arm. I like that that's kind of rare in Mythic Legions because some lines that just kind of have that lack of symmetry for lack of symmetry's sake, I kind of get annoyed with. So I like that it's a little bit more rare here, and you still get those kind of like variations, but there's always the option to have symmetry, or at least for the most part. She comes pretty packed in with weapons, and that's why she's coming in the 28th spot. Next up, we've got our first mount, and that is Atheon. Now, as far as mounts go, I try to also keep these to a minimum because of the shelf space that they do take up. Now, as far as horses go, I don't think you can really go wrong with a flaming horse. The colors on him, like I've said, I want my figures to pop. I definitely think he pops. I like the horns. I like the armor. And I think this goes really well with Arethyr. The flames, you can definitely tell that this is like a horse that's coming to bring your doom. Next up, we've got Uraku. Again, I like the bare-chested green orcs. I think they look cool. Makes them look just like even more ready for battle because they're like, I don't even need a full plate of armor here. I'm going to mess you up anyway. I like that he's dual wielding weapons in this picture at least. I like kind of that rusted look, but like just barely. Like he takes care of his stuff as much as he can, but I imagine him fighting in the Colosseum for so long that there's just not much he can do to save the armor from rusting. At least that's what's happened in my headcanon. Might not be quite 100% to the lore, but that's kind of the beauty about Mythic Legions, at least for me, is you can get these characters and you can kind of make up your own fantasy world going along with Mythos. In the 23rd spot, we've got Snag. Now, this one is, I think, maybe one of the more iconic figures that we've seen so far. I think this head sculpt is very recognizable as a Mythic Legion head sculpt. The nose, the ears, the hat, I think it's like, this just totally makes this figure. I even like the black limbs, like he's wearing kind of that more spandex tight underfitting shirt. I also think it's very fun that he comes with these antlers. He doesn't have a head that you can port these antlers on. You could use them on other figures that you have, but I just think it's fun that like he's holding the antlers and that's like his accessory. Getting into another Motu tribute, we've got Perplor. And you got to make sure you enunciate all those R's in his name. I think this looks a lot like Panther, like it's going for. As far as Motu tributes go, I'm not going to say he's my favorite, but he is up there because I'm a sucker for the Jaguelians. He does come with a purple orc head, but again, I'm probably always going to display him with the Jaguelian head. I'm not a huge fan of the like neck fur that comes with the Jaguelians, so I think this more armored up look that we see here is my preferred version of displaying this head. I also really like the colors of the shield. I think that's just a cool touch to have that copper with the purples and the like tealish armor that he has. Just missing out on the top 20, we've got the Colosseum Orc. This guy, he looks like he is ready for battle in the Colosseum, and I love it. Again, kind of that similar like bare-chested but heavily armored orc. He's got the shield, which that's probably one of my favorite shields in Mythos. I just don't love the clip. I don't trust those not to snap no matter what line it is. I would rather it be a peg that they hold on to. But he's got the giant hammer. He's got a sword. Kind of everything you would really need for any figure that's going to be battling in the Colosseum, in my opinion. Because I don't really love the spears. This would be my preferred look for most figures. Now into the top 20, we've got Queen Urza. Now, I think it's awesome that out of the orcs, she is the queen. And I also like how light she is on the armor. To me, that makes her seem even more formidable. Like, it's like, I don't even need this armor because you're never going to get close enough to me to ever use your weapons. She's that much of a warrior that she's that confident in her skills that she doesn't need the armor, and I think that's a cool touch. I don't have this figure, but I would put her among the top figures that I would like to track down at some point. Sticking with females, we've got the Deluxe Female Orc Builder. Now this one I think is cool because it's a great entry into Pop and Swap. This comes packed in with quite a bit of accessories and extra parts. So with one figure, you can get so many distinct looks, and it's going to help fill out the rank. Now going back down in size, we're going to Thwick. I think this is a pretty cool goblin. I like that he comes with the turtle shell. I like the sword. Most of all, I like the blues and the reds, the curve of his horns. I just think this guy looks fun, like he's probably out on the battlefield laughing, pretty quick and nimble. As far as goblins go, he's up there in the ranks for me. Sticking with the goblins, though, however, is just your general goblin. This one I could see as your like main army. I imagine like 5 or 6 of these guys turning around the corner and chasing you down. I like their big bald head. This just kind of screams army builder to me, and I think this would work with multiple lines outside of Mythic Legions. Going from the little guy to the big guy, we've got Archimedes. Now this one is a pretty unique ogre scale figure. He, up until recently, was the only Cyclops. We just got a new Cyclops head with the ogres. But Archimedes has a helmet that doesn't come with other figures, so that's kind of a cool, unique touch to him. Also, the paint on him I think is cool. For some reason, it makes me think he's a little bit more wise than your standard ogre. But I also love all the paint details in his armor, the soft goods. Pretty cool figure. Now into the top 15, we've got Borrier. Now, I've always had him in my headcanon as a little bit more of a good guy. I could see him siding a little bit more with Xylona versus Arethyr, but I do think it's kind of cool to spread out those more like anthropomorphic figures. And I do hope we get some more like him in the future, because this is, I always imagined Borrier is like his name, but that's his race. So I think it'd be cool if we could get some other Borrier characters from his army and kind of fill them out. Maybe we're going to get a named Borrier at some point. I think that would be cool. And now my favorite goblin. This is King Noglin. I think it's so cool that they were able to take a small figure and somehow give him one of the biggest personalities in all of the Mythic Legion line. You can just tell that this guy thinks he is all that, and it makes sense that he's the king. He's got a cool crown, soft goods cape, and a giant golden scepter. This guy's, he just has all of the attitude. Going from the small guy to the big guy again, we've got your Legion Builder Ogre. This was one that I tried pretty hard to track down for a while, and now it seems like every single wave we're getting a new ogre, which I think is really cool, or at least an ogre scaled figure. Like I said, those are some of my favorites because I appreciate the bigger, heftier figures, and I'm happy to get the fully painted ones. These guys are really cool, though, to kind of fill out the background. And like I said, it's cool to have different scales within your legions. Like you've got your 1.0s, 2.0s, you got your goblins and dwarfs, but then you've got those other figures that tower over them, like the ogre scale figures and the trolls. Coming in at 13th place, we've got the Fury Clan Orc. I don't know why I like red, but I don't like purple. I think it's because I think this guy is a little bit more pop and swappable, because I have so many other red figures that he really works well with. I also really like kind of the darker grayish black armor with the red. I think that's a cool touch. I don't have any of these guys yet, but hopefully down the road I will get a few. Just missing out on the top 10, we've got the Deluxe Male Orc Builder. Similar to the female, I think you just get so many different looks within one package. And then if you have other orcs to mix and match, this guy, you're just off to the races with. I'm sure there's a limit, but it seems like an unlimited amount of pop and swap, different types of characters, different looks you can get just from buying one box. You do have to pay a little bit more for it, but I think it's well worth the money. And these are still fairly available, especially in the Cabal. So if you don't have one of these yet, I would highly recommend him. Coming in at 10th place is Krona. This is obviously a tribute to Trapjaw. Trapjaw has always been one of my favorite Masters of the Universe characters, and I think they did a pretty good job on him. I like the armored up arm, kind of probably where the weapon arm would be on Trapjaw. I do think it would be cool if we could get maybe not a redo, but just somehow that you could put a weapon as his arm, kind of like Trapjaw, but maybe that's a little bit too on the nose and they don't want to be so exact. The colors are really good for, obviously showing off Trapjaw. He comes with a plethora of weapons, just like Trapjaw would, and his alternate head is pretty cool, but I do like this green skull with kind of the purplish crown. Getting into my favorite female figure in this faction is Lady Averona. I like the paint job on the eyes. I think it makes her look much more evil, because originally when she was announced, I thought that this would be more of a heroic figure in my mind. But when you get her in hand, you can definitely tell she's kind of got that evil in her. And I think she also pairs really well with the Headless Horseman horse. So that's usually how I have her displayed, is next to that, because the dark red of the horse matches really well with the maroons and the dark armor of Lady Averona. Coming in at 8th place is Kurzog, another ogre, and this one is your fully painted ogre. The Ogre Legion builder obviously comes more with the flat armor. This one, all those bones, all those buttons, the eyes on the belt, it's all painted up. You've got the unhelmeted head. This guy is super cool. I was trying to track him down for quite a while, but just never really found the price I was looking for. I saw him at Legion's Con, still a little more than I wanted to pay, and then he was in an in-stock sale that like I really probably should have bought him, but I have so many other Ogre scale figures on pre-order from Mythic Legions that I know I'm going to run out of room soon. So I was thinking I should probably just paint up my Legion builder. I think this guy's probably going to find his way into my collection at some point. Again, another iconic figure. Four Horsemen has the whole giant statue of Kurzog. This guy, I just feel like he's imposing, and he's awesome. That seems odd to put in a Legion builder into the top 10, but coming in at 7th place is the Black Knight. I think this works out so well. Even though he's a Legion builder, you really don't need any paint on a Black Knight. I think the red plume and the red sash are a cool touch to just give a splash of color within the figure. Everybody kind of recognizes the Black Knight as a character outside of Mythic Legions and just in medieval lore in general. And within Mythic Legions, I think the black armor is so versatile that you can use in so many pop and swaps. There's been a lot of times in pop and swaps for myself that I've wanted some black armor. So having that kind of plain figure works well as itself, but it also works well in enhancing some of your other figures. And the Black Knight is not our only Legion builder in the top 10, because in 6th place, we have the Orc Legion builder. Now, I'm sure there's some bias here for me because this was one of, I think this was maybe the second figure that I ever opened from Mythic Legions, and this figure blew me away. I didn't even know this was a Legion builder until we were interviewing Jeremy Gerard, and he was telling me about Legion builders. The fact that this guy doesn't come fully painted surprised me, because when I opened him up, like the armor has almost like a sparkle to it, which seemed like a detail that I've never seen in my other action figures before. It's the first time I had ever seen this style of axe, which I think is the best axe out of any action figure line ever. I like the heft of it. Like, it's a big two-handed axe. You can pour it on both sides, one side. The sword, I just thought this guy was one of the coolest figures I'd ever opened. And again, there's probably some bias because it was the second figure I had ever opened from Mythic Legions, but I still think to this day it holds up as an amazing figure. And as a Legion builder, it's cheaper, so that gives him extra points as well. In the top 5, we have King Bromden Ironjaw, my favorite of the small figures. I had a lot of small figures at the bottom of my list, but we've got one in the top 5 as well. I don't have this figure, but this is one that I voted for in the All-Stars because I would like to get him. I think he's got a super cool head sculpt. I love the beard. I like that he has a removable crown. I even like his alternate head, the more helmeted version. He's got soft goods. He comes with a ton of weapons. As far as dwarves go, he may not be my favorite, but he's definitely in the contention for being in that top spot of dwarfs, in my opinion. Coming in at 4th place, we have Belphegor. Again, maybe there's some bias here because this was one of those first 5 figures that I had opened, but I think that Belphegor is one of my favorite figures to pop and swap with. I like the reds, although his red is a little different than some of the other reds, but it works well, especially when you start adding armored parts. But I also bought him at first with the red wings, so you put those on him. That's a new look. You swap him with some of the other figures, give him more of like a fully armored look. I will say I don't love hooved feet in Mythic Legions. I always have trouble getting them to stand and stay standing, but Belphegor as a figure is well deserving of the 4th spot. Coming in at 3rd place, we have Arethyr. Now this guy, as far as iconic characters go, this one is one that I think of a lot of times with Mythic Legions. I think his head sculpt, the flames, the horns, the helmet, I think I don't know how they decided to do that, because that's one of the coolest heads I think I've ever seen in all of action figures. I like his shoulder armor, the wings, the flames, his weapons. This just screams like this is a horseman of the apocalypse. And out of all of the 4 horsemen in Mythos, he is my number 1 favorite. Coming in at 2nd place is Gorgo Aetherblade. I kind of lumped in the original release and the version 2 together because I think both are deserving of this spot. I've heard a lot of people say that Gorgo is what got them into Mythic Legions, especially some of the OGs. So I think the horns on him kind of draw people in. They're like, wait a minute, what is that? Because at least I personally don't think of knights having horns in their helmet. So it kind of draws you in, and then you start looking at the details on him, the reds, the golds, the black. You see his sword, the Aether Blade. his faction shield, the soft goods red cape, and this figure is awesome. I think it's a great value. I had the original. I think I traded him for some other Legions, but I would like to track down this version 2 for sure and get him to display as my Gorgo. Coming in the first place spot, a little bit of a cheat here, but we've got 4 figures. This is the Furious 4, maybe 5 if you count the Legions Con exclusive Jaguelian head, but this, in my opinion, is the best way to get into pop and swaps. If you get especially the Legions Con version of these guys, you get 5 heads and you can get so many unique looks. And like I said, you can use Belphegor, you can use a Fury Clan Orc, you can use Red Krampus, and there's just so many different things you can do with them. I have fun just trying to come up with different things. You can use the red head you can use the red demon head from the heads pack. There's just so many things that go with this pack that the fun never really ends, and that's why this is my favorite. It may actually be my favorite in all of Mythic Legions. It's hard to say what your favorite is because it kind of depends on what you played with last, what you just got in the mail. But these ones, it just seems like every time I go back to them, I still have just as much fun as the first time, and probably even more so. So that completes the rankings for the Legion of Arethyr. Let me know in the comments, where did I go completely wrong? Where would you have changed things? This is just kind of a representation that I used to kind of even out my rankings. I put the figures that we've had version 2s of at the very bottom of the list because I wanted to rank the most recent figures that were coming out. This isn't really a ranking of like the best figures, the bottom figures, or like terrible figures. I really do like all of the figures within this faction, but like I said, something's got to be at the top, something's got to be at the bottom, and this is just kind of a visual representation for me to try to organize my thoughts. So if you wanted to find this, I'll leave a link for that down in the description, and you can do your own rankings of these as well. Share them in the Cabal, tag me, I'd love to see them. And remember, enter to win the giveaway for Flogius. This can be your first entry. Let me know what your top figure in this faction is, and I'll see you back here in the next one.